I am being watched. Welcome everyone to Male Fuzz TV. I am Peter, and today I'm going to be talking about Person of Interest, Season 1, Episode 23. It's called Firewall, and it is the season finale. Lots of big stuff went down. Lots of exciting developments. I did know, one thing that spoiled a twist in this episode. I did know that Amy Acker was going to be playing a specific character. So for most of this episode, her being seemingly someone else, I could see the turn coming. That did not ruin anything, though. I don't think. It was intriguing early on as to what her game was, what her ploy was, but the actual build up to the reveal I thought was done very well. The big sort of takeaway from this episode before we get into anything else is that we finally get to meet Root. That's who Amy Acker is playing. But she's going by a Dr. Turing, and don't think I didn't notice the name Turing there that she used as an alias. If you're not familiar with the Turing test, which is the test to try and determine if a computer has become self-aware. I may not be the exact phrasing, but that's the gist of it. And that's the question: is she testing the machine, or is she testing the boys in particular? Arguably both, in a weird way, because the machine fell for it. She takes a hit out on herself, on her alias, sets up a fake therapy office and has fake clients, and it's all to lure out Reese and Finch because she wants to get to Finch, and that's where the episode kind of gives us our big cliffhanger. A lot of big stuff there. Obviously, I like Amy Acker a lot. I'm a big fan of Buffy and Angel, so seeing Fred pop up was a nice experience. I also enjoy the construction, like I said, of how they build up to the reveal. There's a really nice thing where throughout the episode, Alicia's stuff is still playing out. She's investigating Finch, and she confronts Finch in the car when he's waiting on who turns out to be Root arriving. He's waiting for Turing, thinking he's going to take her to safety, but Alicia shows up instead and holds him at gunpoint and says, "You built the machine. I want you to help me kill it." She calls it God, and she wants to kill God, and basically says she can't live with the machine looking at her all the time, and that she's running from it. Finch kind of corrects her and says, "You're not really running from the machine. The machine, I've done a lot of bad things, I've made a lot of mistakes, but the machine's not one of them. What you're actually running from is people." And the scene comes to an end when she says something along the lines of, "You're lucky I found you first." And it cuts to Zoe, who's back in this episode helping out Reese and Finch investigate what's going on. And she's breaking into, Caroline Turing's office. And what's really nice about this is that it goes from the question, the wrong kind of person finding you, and it cuts to Zoe investigating that office. And if you remembered that from the episode where Root was introduced halfway through the season, you might actually recognize a little bit of music that plays here. Basically, the Root theme plays as she's entering the office. And it's a sort of thing where, on a first viewing, I think it really sort of draws you in. And if you remember that little bit, that little theme, that little motif, it does kind of draw you in, and you're like, "Oh, wait a minute, we're building to something here." And by the time Root does show up at the car and shoots Alicia in the back of the head, which is a very well shot moment because you can see her in the reflection, it confirms, basically yells at you through the screen. But by that point, Zoe's found the fake photograph on the desk. The computer on the desk has started to go all corrupt and shut down. It says Root at the bottom. It spells it out to you right before the character actually reveals it and changes how she's acting in front of people, because the whole episode she's been this scared, timid therapist, and then here she's just switched into murderous super hacker. I don't even know what to call her, honestly. But she is delighted to have found Finch. She kidnaps Finch, and it leads me to one of my favorite moments of the whole show so far. And I realize I'm talking about all the ending stuff, but that's the big stuff that really sticks out. I'll go back and talk about the meat of the episode afterwards. But the ending, which is Reese now on his own, realizing he's been duped, and now Finch has been kidnapped and he's nowhere to be found. The end of this episode really draws in and advances conceptually what we're doing with the machine. Because up until this point, there's been these little hints. I talked about it in the flashbacks in one of the episodes where you could kind of see the machine was analyzing the people in the room, or like it was making a decision. It kind of felt like, we are telling a story here about AI of some kind, and this felt like a big leap to actually have Reese talk to the machine like it's a person, right? The ending of this finale is Reese in a busy New York street, just stopping at the corner and looking up at one of the security cameras and saying that she's got Finch because he was working for you, so you're going to help me get him back. And then the payphone rings, and that's where we end. He picks up the phone, and it cuts to credits, which is a great payback or payoff to the setup with the payphone a couple of episodes ago. I thought that was a really well placed towards the end of the season seed for this moment now in retrospect, because it just felt like as soon as the phone started to ring, you realize this is how it communicates with Finch, so therefore it's communicating now with Reese. And I cannot wait to hear what it says to him. Because it's just this idea that he makes this leap. And I love that there's just so many like creative choices made with how to do this moment, where they could have chosen to do this at nighttime. They could have done this in the middle of the night when there's no one else around, and that would have worked as well. There would have been an atmosphere to him standing alone in the middle of this empty street, looking up at the camera, asking for help. But there's something very different about doing it in a busy middle of the day street where there is literally a sea of people moving in all directions around him, and he's just stopped in the middle and looking up and asking for help. It thematically really works with what the machine is that it's there and no one's noticing it. He's asking for help in amongst all these people, with them not even paying attention to what he's doing or who he's talking to. I love this ending, and I think the ending, as far as the science fiction element, which, and it's not really been that much of a science fiction show up until this point, other than just this tease of maybe what the machine could be or how it works. This felt like, okay, we're this idea that the machine itself cares about things in general, if not specifically about certain people, or has some sort of moral compass and wants to do good. If it does want to do good, I mean, that could be something we explore as time goes on. Maybe it's more neutral in a weird way, and it can be used inappropriately, or might make decisions that don't appear good down the line. I don't know. But even just this idea of talking about it making a decision, it makes a decision seemingly here, assuming that it's the machine on the phone, but I'm feeling pretty good about that. It makes a decision to respond to Reese. And that's a big deal. And I love how simple that is. It chooses to respond to a request or a demand, depending on how you want to look at that statement that Reese makes. So, yeah, loved the ending. Loved it. Can't wait to watch season 2 starting next week. Super pumped for it. It's a great, like, tantalizing tease for, like, oh, where are we going with all this? And it's not that I think the show is going to change. The great thing is that I've enjoyed the episode to episode quite a bit, and the character relationships and dynamic. Part of what makes this so good is because at this point, Reese 100% cares about Finch. This is not just the guy he's working with. Over the course of the season, we have built a friendship, we have built a relationship. He just gave him that apartment a couple episodes ago. We've been doing all these things. He learned a lot about him personally in the last episode, and here we are, and it's like he has to save him, and it's not just about saving someone who's innocent, it's about saving his friend. I feel that. And speaking of great emotional payoffs, let's talk about Carter and Fusco, baby. They both end up in the command center for the FBI as they're tracking Reese. A big part of the conceit of this episode is that a lot of it takes place in this hotel, where Reese is running around with Caroline Turing, later to be revealed as Root, and trying to dodge both the FBI and a group of corrupt cops from HR who are trying to kill Turing and also him, just kind of by proxy. Carter's feeding him info about where to go, and like, don't go there yet because the FBI are there. She's sending him messages, and it looks like Fusco's sending messages to HR, which I'm sure he is to a point because he's meant to be playing along, but it leads to finally the realization for both of them that they're both working with Reese. I really like this scene on its own. I love Carter's reaction because I think the genius thing about it is that she just suspects Fusco's being a bad guy. She suspects that he works for HR, and once upon a time, she might have just been right. But here, when he's confronted by this, and she assumes all the worst things about him, and he's put into a corner, and he tries to defend himself, he tries to just tell the truth. He brings up the guy in the suit, and I think Carter's reaction, Henson's like performance here, when she reacts and steps back and just almost like stumbles and collapses when Fusco says the guy in the suit, and then he describes who Finch is, and like that matches what she knows. And the phone rings, and she says, "You've got a lot of explaining to do, Finch." And then the look on Fusco's face as he's like, "Wait, she knows who that is." There's just this wonderful moment. It feels like a culmination here and it feels like something that was deserving to put this in the finale. It feels like we're closing this chapter where they don't know about each other, and we can go into season 2. As much as I said, I don't expect the show to change that much episode to episode because of the very end of the finale. That's going to be a slower burn for sure, these big concepts. But one of the things that will change instantly is the dynamic with Carter and Fusco and how they interact with each other. Now they can work as a team to help Reese and Finch. This is the status quo change that you want get into a second season. You want something that shakes up a little bit of how it operates on a weekly basis, and I think this is it. But the big payoff, really, though, is the way they show up to help. Where Reese gets cornered in the basement in the parking area, and he's cornered. He's down at his last clip, and he's basically screwed. And then the car comes, diving through the door. Both of them get out and start shooting and sort of backing him up. And it's kind of heartwarming. It's not like a super emotional moment necessarily, but I do feel a bit of a fist pump kind of moment out of it, because so much about this show is Reese feeling like he is on his own, and that's part of what's made the friendship and purpose that Finch's gave him so special. But one of the things that we've been talking about since episode like 2 or 3 is this idea that over time he's earning allies through his good deeds because of what he does. He's earned Carter as a friend. He's even earned Fusco. He's earned Zoe as a friend and an ally who's going to be showing up to help him. Seeing the fruit, it's sort of that comes from that, right? The bearing of fruit, if you will, of that fully forming and them coming to save his ass when he is actually out of options is very fulfilling. Again, it feels like a big finale moment, and the back half of this episode is basically just dopamine, like up through the ass, quite frankly. I felt it was just great, the whole back half of the episode. Even Finch gets a big moment where it looks like earlier on that he's cornered, and that both the FBI and especially the HR guys are about to just blow up the floor of the hotel. Finch pulls a trick where he shuts down the cell towers in the area so no one can communicate. I do have a slight potential question about the logistics of this, because they mentioned that one number's waitlisted, right? And they're like, whose number is it? And it cuts to Finch calling Reese, and you're like, okay, so it's Finch's number that's waitlisted. However, actually, does she? Do you know what? I was going to say that if it's Finch's number, it mostly works because Finch is the one that calls Carter, Finch is the one that calls Fusco, Finch is the one that calls Reese again, obviously, to talk to him and talk him through things. So it makes sense that it's Finch's number. But for some reason in my head, I was thinking that Carter also talked to Reese. She does. No, she does. She calls him. It's not a text, because she doesn't text him again, but she does call him again. And Reese says, "Thanks for your help, Carter." That happens. I think it's before she confronts Fusco. It's right before that, actually, because she says, "I know who's the mole. I'm going to take care of it." And that's when she goes into the bathroom and take care of Fusco. So she actually calls Reese right after the cell tower blackout things happened. And that there's a slight asterisk there, because I'm not really sure if she should be able to do that given the big plot point that just happened. There might be an explanation, but I'm not sure what the explanation is. So it might be a mild little plot hole. It's not a huge deal, but it is something that kind of stuck out to me. I watched this episode twice. I watched it early at the weekend, thinking I might get the episode reviewed on early, because I'm trying to get ahead again. I want to try and get ahead in all my solo recordings. And I ended up just being too tired to record after I watched it, and I was going to do it like the next day, and then I thought, you know what, it's a finale. I'll just leave it a couple days and I'll watch it again and maybe catch some things. And this phone thing I was really paying attention to this time because I remembered thinking that something was off about it. So it's not a big deal. It's a minor nitpick. I do think the moment where he shuts all the towers down and now they can't communicate is a fun big moment, and it's kind of a badass moment for Finch in a lot of ways. One of the things a couple of things that did stick out to me though watching it again is early on in the episode, right? So they get the number and it's this Caroline Turing, who is the therapist, turns out to be Root. When Reese pretends to be a patient and goes to talk to her, there was a few things that, especially on a second viewing, even though the first time I knew that Amy Acker was going to turn out to be Root, there was just a few things here that really stuck out to me. They were not big things, but they were kind of just like little subtle foreshadowing moments or wink winks kind of thing, where at one point Turing talks about how she's very secretive and she'll keep her clients' information secret no matter what. This is very important to her. And it cuts to Finch, who's listening to the conversation, and he says, "A woman after my own heart." That really stuck out on the second viewing to me because, of course, back in the Root episode where this character was introduced but we didn't get to see her, it did present this idea that Finch was impressed by her by the end of the episode, where there was almost like a dark romance blossoming. Not that I suspect there's going to be an actual romance here, not at all, but just this idea that it was this sort of like sense of respect and that he'd met his match. So the idea here that she says something like that and he's like, "Oh, a woman after my own heart," it just kind of made me go, oh, that's almost like linking back to kind of that sort of mutual respect despite the circumstances of like how much of a opponent she is. And then the other thing was when she's prying Reese for information, and it makes sense in the context of the scene because she's meant to be a therapist and she's asking about the fact that he's kind of paranoid, that he always looks around and looks for entry points. She guesses that he's ex-military. I think on a second viewing that I was like, well, I can read this now a couple of different ways. I can read this as she already knows all this because she's done her homework and she's prodding at him and that works. Or she doesn't know this, but she's prodding more with the idea that she wants to learn about who Reese is because she has this interest in Reese and Finch. It doesn't go in too much detail about how much she already knows about them, other than she's figured out how they operate, and it's when someone's in trouble, she comes out of or they come out to like help whoever it is, and that's how she's lured them out. And again, the Turing test, right? She's seeing if the machine will not that this is necessarily her main goal, but this idea that the machine will it be able to detect that something's not true, that it's a lie, and seemingly not. Although this might be a learning experience. It's, as Finch pointed out, it self-updates, it learns, it evolves, and I'm curious to see where we go with some of this. Obviously, a lot of this stuff early on is Reese protecting her when the HR guys try to attack her. It's a fun enough little sequence. We have Fusco meeting the heads of the HR, which he turns in anonymously at the end of the episode to the FBI, and we see a lot of those guys getting arrested. It doesn't look like Simmons gets arrested, though. He's just kind of walking away. And I thought they were going to get him because you can kind of see him on the cameras at one point. The FBI see him cutting the wires, but I guess they never see his face. They only see kind of the top of his head or his hat. So I guess he's still in play next season, potentially. I'm wondering what they'll do with him now that HR's done, effectively. If I have like a genuine complaint, and it's not a big one, but I do have one small nitpick with the episode, and that is that it does a very overused TV trope at the start of the episode, which I especially here don't think it was needed at all. And that's we're going to show you a scene from the middle of the story or the end of the story at the start, and then cut back 24 hours and see how we got to that point. The reason why I don't like it is it usually tends to be this crutch of they want to just create some extra excitement because maybe they don't think the start of their episodes that exciting on its own. Maybe if it's an action show and there's not a lot of action till later on, they want to show a little bit of it at the start to hook people, so they'll stick around to see how we get there. But I think it really felt odd to me with this one for a couple of reasons. One, it felt like when we actually get to the moment later where it's Finch calling Carter for help and saying it's an emergency, Reese needs you, get downtown now. I think when we get to that moment, when it actually happens, one is actually pretty early in the episode. It's not even halfway through, so it felt like a weird pull to do something from there. But also, it kind of oversold the moment as like he's going to die right now if you don't get there. And while he does end up in jeopardy later because of the predicament he's in, it's not really that like nail biting at that moment, so it felt a little disingenuous, I guess, because of that. It's not a huge deal, but I just don't think the episode needs it. Like, I think if the episode started just with the first chronological moment, it would have been fine. Like, the tension that rises throughout the episode is fantastic. It did not need this little "this is going to happen later" moment that it did at the start. But I guess it's just one of the gremlins of working with network TVs. Maybe they felt they had to do this for whatever reason, but I just think it's unnecessary and didn't really add to anything to the episode. But that is a minor quibble in the grand scheme of things. There's a little bit of, again, more root prying into Reese, asking about his past as he try to make up for like failing someone else, and that's why he does this. Again, it felt, and especially with hindsight and knowing this is root of her just trying to know more about him and what makes them tick, because this is something she might use later, or something that will give her information to her advantage at some point. That was very entertaining, and I think Reese, he's playing the hero here, and we've done this a few times. In fact, the very first episode of the show was a woman who we think is the victim, but turns out to actually be a bad guy. I think it's an interesting bookend to also end the season with that, but this time it's not just a one and done character, it's someone who's going to be a prominent figure going forward. It really feels like, she feels vulnerable and Reese is saving the damsel, but it's all a subversion, because when she does turn out to be who she is the most capable character he's ever dealt with. She is very smart, she hacks into stuff, she does like insanely high white collar crime and stuff like that. She's playing in a different league. The idea that she wants to get to Finch because interacting with Finch and Reese the first time gave her enough questions that maybe on some level she has figured out that something like the machine exists, or has some concept of it existing. I don't know how much she knows right now because it doesn't get into it, but I suspect that that's what she really cares about, is finding out more about it and whatever it is. And well, we know she knows some things because she, at the very least, I think, hears a lot of the conversation that Alicia has with Finch. But when she gets in the car, she says, "I thought she'd never stop talking," which does imply that she was listening to some of it, and they were talking about the machine. They were talking about Finch building it, and Alicia does say a couple of interesting things now that I'm on this, actually, about she thinks the machine killed Nathan, which Finch denies and says it didn't. She says that Nathan must have known all the reasons why this shouldn't exist, which I guess is well, no, it's not really true. He did want to put in a failsafe, he did want to put in a back door, we know that, but that was more almost worrying about other humans like doing stuff to it, I think, at the time. Maybe I'm misremembering that, but I feel like that's also a little off base. Like, the scene's very interesting because obviously she confronts Finch, and Finch is very scared and he's very shocked to have all this being thrown at him. But the more she talks, the more it's clear she doesn't actually know what she thinks she knows. She gets a lot of information kind of wrong as the scene goes on. I think that's interesting. Not that I'm thinking that's going to misdirect Root. I feel like Root probably already has some PCs, and this is just confirming or denying certain things. And I think going into season 2 with this interesting new player involved is really exciting. I think a lot of good shows will usually do a big new character for season 2, whether it's in the season 1 finale or it's something you do just in season 2. Even shows that aren't as even something as simple as Stranger Things introducing Max as a new main character in season 2, or what's another good example? Talking about Angel. I mean, Fred was a new character in season 3, but Angel took Gunn, for example, who was in 1 or 2 episodes in season 1, and he became a regular in season 2. And a lot of shows do that, and I think the idea of growing the family and making someone, again, it goes along with what I was saying about the Carter and Fusco dynamic changing, so that it'll make things feel fresh again when we start season 2. Having another new character also inject this life and basically shake everyone out of their comfort zones. One of the things that a lot of shows might do is they'll, let's say you've got Reese and Finch. This won't happen in this show because it's just, but I'm just using this as an example because this is what something like Star Trek or something like any show that has some sort of hierarchy and law enforcement might do, is that season 2, for example, might replace Finch with someone who's more of a hard ass, and Reese is going to have to deal with someone who he doesn't like very much because he's bonded with Finch already. That won't happen here because I don't think the premise of this show allows for that. But that's the sort of thing that a lot of shows will do to shake things up and challenge the characters' like dynamics, and you'll find that you're longing for the original character to come back because they made us care about the relationship. Here they're kind of doing that in a way because Finch has been kidnapped, but he's not going to be replaced by someone else in his role, obviously. I suspect, if I was to make guesses, I would suspect that Finch will probably be saved by the end of episode 1 next time, but that Root's not going to be just a one and done thing now. I feel like, I don't know if she's officially a series regular in season 2, but she's at least going to be recurring at this point. I think this feels like a big introduction. So no, the season finale was fantastic. It was exciting in all the right places. It tied off a lot of big sort of threads that we've had. Carter and Fusco finding out about each other, HR finally going down, someone finally kind of like getting involved and messing with Reese and Finch. And I mean, look at it this way. All season I've been saying how every so often I keep worrying that Finch is out in the field and that he's in danger because he's more vulnerable than Reese, because he's not got the skills to intervene, as the opening intro always describes Reese. The fact that this ends with him finally being in that danger again feels like they knew that was a concern for the audience all season long, and then giving it to us here is again this payoff. It's this like, hey, you've been worried about this repeatedly throughout the season, it's finally happening. And that's what season finales are so good at being, is because they finally get to do big shake-ups like that, and that's good stuff. So excellent. Can't wait for more of the machine, can't wait for more of Root, and can't wait for more of all the characters. Season 1 has been really great. It's definitely obviously been a very case of the week style show for season 1, and I'm sure that'll be still largely true going forward, at least for a while. But I think the relationship that the season built between its main characters, and even just Reese and everyone around them, like Reese and Carter's dynamic and the way that's changed over the season. The idea of Fusco being this character who might want redemption at a certain point, and seemingly does. By the end of the season, he feels like he's doing good and he's helping by working with Reese and Finch. I think all those relationships and the idea of Reese being this force for good and trying his best to not, I'm noticing that he's shooting a lot of people in the legs. Now, that's not saying that he's not killing anyone. He does blow up a car this episode with 2 bad guys in it. And now it's their own comeuppance. They had the explosives in their car, and he just because Reese, Carter and Fusco, it's after they come in and rescue him, and they're chasing this car with 2 corrupt cops, and they're on the run, and they're trying to catch up to them. And Reese he's been very casual. He's making these dry jokes while they're bickering about him lying to them, and then he just pulls out this trigger. It says, maybe have some distance between us and that car, and then just blows it up. It gave me a chuckle. It's that dry humor that works. They kind of justify it in a way because in terms of like his morality, because right before he does it, Carter specifically points out these 2 guys know they're going down for attempted murder. They'll probably hurt people to get away. And arguably that's the moment where, okay, it's acceptable to kill them because they're just going to get other people killed the way they're going to carry on. So whether or not you think that's enough is entirely up to you, but it is still a TV show where occasionally you want to see bad guys get blown up, and I enjoyed that. If I'm honest. Yeah, really good stuff. Can't wait for season 2. Hopefully you've had some fun going through these episodes in season 1 with me. And I'm looking forward to digging even deeper into the mythology and all these character dynamics next season. So I'll see you next week for that. But you can, of course, support all the content and help keep it coming, help keep the lights on by going over to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and supporting over there for however much it feels comfortable to support with, and get some bonuses for your trouble. including monthly exclusive reviews of Columbo. If you like the idea of me talking about an old show, you can get that over on Patreon. But there's also bonuses for all the movie podcasts that I do with other people. If you're not familiar with those, since it's the finale, I'll promote this stuff a bit more. If you've been enjoying all this all season, then it makes sense you might be interested in some other stuff that I do with other people. We have a horror movie podcast called Screams After Midnight. Maybe more specific is the Atomic Cinema Experiment, which is a sci-fi movie podcast that I did with Tara up until about episode 215, and David, who's on another movie podcast, is joining that show as the co-host going forward starting in December. So if you want to hear me talk about AI and computers and robots and whatever else comes up, then that's the place for all those movies. But thank you very much for joining me. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?